Hello, welcome back to Out on the Line podcast, and we are going to be doing a review for you this week, and it's going to be an album that I think many of you may have heard before, but I'm here as always with my co-host Alex. Alex, how you doing this week?
Jeff, you're not going to find me being tardy to the party. I am here on time, pleasantly surprised, and ready to rock.
Yes.
We're talking about a classic album with a lot of lore for us, and a lot of lore for one Sturgill Simpson.
Yes. And this honestly might be one of the most lore heavy albums for you and I, like in general. You know, I think like Meatloaf obviously is huge. Springsteen is huge, but I think like this is one that I think we discovered together. You know, I think we were like kind of aware of who this guy is, but I think we found out just who the fuck Sturgill Simpson is when we got A Sailor's Guide to Earth on Record Store Day in Austin.
That's right.
Believe, yeah. And that record store no longer exists. It was right there. I forget what the name of it was, but it was right there at the corner of 6th Street and like the frontage road for 35.
Was it the one where I got Trout Mask replica?
I think so. I think it was the same day.
Yeah. We did not listen to Trout Mask. Well, I can't even say the fucking name of the thing. We did not listen to Trout Mask replica.
No, we did not. But we did listen to Sailor's Guide to Earth. And I was mentioning to you that I had an analogy, or I forget what the technical term, whatever. But what I thought about with Sturgill Simpson and kind of progression of the albums is, so High Top Mountain, his first one, I guess outside of like the Sunday Valley stuff, we're not going to include that stuff as Sturgill Simpson. So High Top Mountain, the first album, it's like when they're first arriving to Jurassic Park, and it's like, okay, we're at a park, like this is cool, everything's good. And then Meta Modern Sounds and country music is like the ripples in the glass of water when you first start, when that T-Rex starts stomping. And then Sailor's Guide to Earth, I think, is when the T-Rex brings its big old head down and looks those kids in the eye. And that was the announcement of Sturgill Simpson into my life, just like that was the announcement of that T-Rex. And what a whoa moment both things were. See, I landed that plane. I told you to stick with me.
You did. Long way to go for that one, but it worked. I guess my only question out of that is, which album is the equivalent of the lawyer getting eaten when he's on the shitter?
I think that would be the Ballad of Dude and Juanita, but the lawyer's the bad guy.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I would have said Blue Sky's Mutiny After Midnight because someone's dick is out, but
yeah, that could have been
potato tomato, I guess.
Yeah, I guess depending on which, if you're telling the story to little kids, you got one way. If you're telling the story to big boys like us, you got another way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. We don't go blue on this pod.
So Sturgill Simpson, there's the classic shirt that he would wear, the "Who the fuck is Sturgill Simpson?" High Top Mountain came out and he was just a good old honky tonkin' boy. Fantastic album. Not your typical like kind of that really kind of country western style lyrics either. Like there was some stuff in he's talking about stealing Mopar's guitars and other stuff you can't buy. It's like there's a lot of like really interesting lyrical moments on that album. And then Meta Modern Sounds, you went from like, I don't want to say all punchline type of stuff like you had with High Top Mountain, but it was very clever. It's like it was a lot of wordsmithing and what the fuck rhymes with Bronco, right? Like there was a lot of those things that kind of made you laugh and were really still a testament to his ability as a songwriter. I think Meta Modern Sounds is where, if you were already a fan of him, and I was not at this point, I don't want to get it twisted, folks. I really didn't get into him until Sailor's Guide to Earth. But having gone back to Meta Modern Sounds, there was a much different type of songwriting. And that's where that's introspection that he is now really pretty famous for. Like his ability to look within himself and kind of diagnose maybe what's wrong, or maybe whether he can fix it or not is never the thing. But being able to really just be very self-reflective, I think really started on that Meta Modern Sounds and country music album. And then he came out with the Sailor's Guide to Earth. And this was kind of the explosive moment for him, because I feel like this was the first time that I really, it was the first time that I knew who he was. So it really, and I'm pretty tapped into music, guys. I'm not just some guy when it comes to this stuff, so it's like the fact that I hadn't heard of him yet or really gotten into him, maybe I'd heard the name, who knows, but hadn't gotten into him yet, Sailor's Guide to Earth being what it is and me still getting into him, I think, and not saying that it's like a weird or anything like that, but it was very unlike anything else that I had really been listening to up until that point. So I don't know, were you familiar with him at all before Sailor's Guide?
Yes, and I can actually fill in a little bit of your lore for you
Okay.
and give you credit, because the first Sturgill Simpson I ever heard, and the first time I heard it was when you played actually two cuts. Life Ain't Fair and the World Is Mean, and You Can Have the Crown.
Okay.
You played both of those because you're like, they're so funny, because there's that line, obviously, like the King of Turd Mountain.
Yeah.
And we all had a great laugh over that. And I remember being like, okay, this guy's kind of like a more like clever, kind of ribald Waylon Jennings. He sounds like 70s Waylon Jennings. And so I'm like, and he, this is like very funny, and it's like clever turn of phrase kind of stuff. I like it. And between that and between us moving to Texas and you getting this album and us listening to it, I had heard Turtles All the Way Down. And to me, I was like, all right, it's more bluegrassy than Waylon Jennings, and it's great wordplay, and it's like some very interesting imagery. But it's kind of the same thing as like King Giz, where you hear some of these songs in isolation and they make enough of an impression that you put them on a playlist and you can kind of be like, oh yeah, that song. And you don't really realize like how into that person you're going to get down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point you listen to a whole King Giz album all the way through, and you listen to Paper Mache Dream Balloon all the way through, and you go, oh shit. And then you just can't stop consuming it. It was the same thing. Sailor's Guide to Earth was what I know led to like both of us kind of sitting and doing the whoa moment at the same time. Little did we know that there was going to be this much staying power and genre blending and genre hopping backwards and forwards
Mm-hmm.
as he went on. But yeah, this was the paradigm shift, because I remembered 70s Jennings. I remembered cosmic country, kind of psychedelic, not necessarily like too much envelope pushing, still country, but country with a little bit of a twist, to then deliver this. And by the time we're halfway through Welcome to Earth, like paradigm shift big time in terms of the kind of country I would consume after that, and that I feel safe saying for you would consume after that.
Mm-hmm.
And also like what you knew Sturgill Simpson was capable of. And that was what introduced him into the canon for me from then on, like on board with anything he ever does.
Yeah, and I think in this album really was, I guess I had my timelines mixed up, but I probably had heard or knew those two songs, but certainly was not anything I'd consider like a Sturgill fan, especially not to the point that I am now,
Right.
for sure. So I think what really got me on this album is because you think about songs like Life Ain't Fair and the World Is Mean, and even Long White Line, and even, and You Can Have the Crown, and then you hear Welcome to Earth start, and for just, it's what, 3/4 of the song, 2/3 of the song, whatever it is, till he like kicks into the the big horns, and we start hearing really what the sound of this album is going to be. And it's all strings, it's orchestral, and just it just seems so heartfelt. It seems just as heartfelt as the earlier stuff, but you're seeing a different side of him. You're seeing the guy that's having his first kid. You're seeing the guy like looking at life through a new lens, versus, I don't know that he's any less cynical than he was before, but it certainly sounds less cynical in how he's viewing the world, because now he's got a reason to try to make it good. Now he's got a real reason to try to make the world better. And I think this is, now I don't know if this is what he would consider the touching off point for him, or if he's always just been of the mindset that he's going to do what he wants to do. But this album, I think, certainly launched him into much more of a mainstream kind of stratosphere, and let people know that there was something outside of your traditional, I don't even want to say traditional country, you're really pop country that was starting to kind of dominate at that time. Because at this time it was like you had your Luke Bryans, like Jason Aldean was heavy out there already. Like there was a lot of guys that you wouldn't really consider, I guess, real country artists, right? They were pop country artists. And then those guys led to the bro country kind of stuff that just is the bane of my goddamn existence right now. It really, Sturgill separated himself, one, by the musicianship, like two by the choice of instrumentation in a country album. Like when was the last time you really heard, orchestral strings? Because obviously you have fiddle and things like that, so you have strings in country songs. Like that's not out of the ordinary. But in the way that they were being played here, it was more like you were at a Boston Pops concert or a New York Symphony Orchestra kind of thing. The lyrical content, obviously a lot of it centers around this kind of like sailor's mentality. Grandfather always said God was a fisherman, and now I know the reason why. And then he kicks into like the big horns, and it really, the way it just swings too, right from that start, it's just gives you that same feeling like you just got to start moving with it. Like it just has such a rawness to it, and it just feels so vital when they hit those notes. And that feeling doesn't really let up throughout the whole album. Maybe the musically it doesn't always sound just like that, but those are the themes that you get throughout this whole album. Really just start right at the top there.
And that kind of musical mixture is not inconceivable, like horns and country, horns and blues, country and strings. Like these things are not incompatible, like so incompatible that they can't work and work beautifully and still be country with this added flourish on top of it, because he's not really an artist that's ever like quibbled with that label. It's like, hey, I'll know what to call it. And this was nominated for and won Best Country Album at the Grammys that year, nominated for Album of the Year. So clearly it had a ton of crossover appeal, which is why he did not get any nominations for CMA awards and was not invited to the ceremony. But that to me is very interesting, because at the time, like you said, the prevalence of like, my girl's shucking another man's corn, like that just doesn't offer what historically country music has always offered at its most interesting. And you're disqualified. It's the Beyonce conversation, 10 years previous, or not even 10, but like, a couple years previous to the Beyonce album controversy. Well, it can't be country. Lil Nas X can't be country. Like, it's one of the more gatekeepery genres that's out there. And I think this is his moment where you were talking about, he would have the right to be cynical, or like, was this the start of his cynicism? I think it's the opposite. I think it's lived experience, and it's a lot of failure. It was a lot of regret about time as an addict. It was a lot of bitterness of a lived experience in the Navy. There's a lot of that disillusionment all over this, which is like a warning to the listener and a warning to his son, like, don't fall for it. And there's a lot of nuance to it, and he's speaking from the perspective of someone that was on the inside. So that's not like radio friendly mainstream play. And it doesn't have a characteristically country music sound. And he's always going on and on about like how shitty the industry is and trying to circumvent it and do it his own way. So of course the governing body, the powers that be in country music, are going to tell you not to give a shit about. They're not even going to tell you to do that. They're not going to acknowledge this album's existence, which results in this weird phenomenon where Sturgill Simpson is mainstream but somehow underground. It's very, very odd. And I think that mentality, I think that's a badge of honor thing. And it's all over this album, because he's not drawing attention to himself in an egotistical way. It's all loving tribute, practical advice, lived experience. It's below the neck authentic. We always love to talk about it. Straight from the heart, straight from his life. It's one of the more like honest albums you'll ever hear, even when it's being funny, even when it's being like witty and a little esoteric. It's one of the most lyrically honest albums you will hear, and musically it's a perfect pairing. There's so much to talk about with this. Like I could keep going on and on and on, but I think it's like a perfect synthesis of who Sturgill Simpson is. Wherever he goes, this is always to me going to be the perfect representation of who he is and what he can do.
Yeah, I think this one is on kind of one end of that spectrum, and then the new Mutiny After Midnight album is kind of on the other end of that spectrum, where this is very much like, and it obviously sounds like I'm speaking for him, but this is, I feel like he was taking himself very seriously as a songwriter, and it's reflected in, I think, the things he pulls out of himself for this, versus like Mutiny After Midnight, where he said he basically just like kind of came up with a lot of that stuff just kind of on the fly as he was going. It was just what he was feeling and just more of a raw guttural reaction to the music he was hearing from the band and feelings he was having at the time. And I think Sailor's Guide to Earth is a much more purposeful record. There was much more of a theme to this one, similar to how he did for the Ballad of Dude and Juanita. I think his most thematic album, I would say, for sure. But I think there is a not a true storyline going through this like Dude and Juanita has, but it's just that theme of using the sea to inform morality, to inform decision making, to inform like love itself, and like how those things kind of are reflected in the sea, and allowing those things to be reflected in you. He has, on Keep It Between the Lines, for example, it's like he's got those classic Sturgill things like don't turn mailboxes into baseballs, don't get busted selling at 17. But then he has a line like most thoughts deserve about 2 or 3 more. And it sounds very simple, but that's such a quintessential like country lyric where it sounds very simple, but it means a lot. And I think everybody can relate to that, whether whether you're his son that he's basically writing this stuff for, or you're just a random guy like me listening to it. I think a lyric like "Don't burn 2 lanterns at the same time. No ship out on the water will pay your rent." It's saying like, yeah, you can have these dreams and things, but if you don't go and do that, if you don't bring that ship back to shore, what's the point of it out there fishing? And I think making you think that way from lyrics that simple is one of the strongest things that he does. I think he's in what is the definition of an expert, or somebody that's a genius or extremely intelligent, is their ability to boil something down to explain it to somebody that has no idea what that thing was before they explained it to them. To use language that makes sense to the person you're explaining it to. And things like that are simple to listen to, and maybe you don't think for a second about it after that, but if you choose to think about it, there's a lot there to unpack. You go into a song like Breaker's Roar, which one of the ballads for sure on this, like All Around You is another one, his cover of In Bloom. Like he does some great ballads on this album as well. But he says like, oh, and everything is not what it seems. This life is but a dream. Shatter illusions that hold your spirit down. Open up your heart and you'll find love all around. Breathing and moving are healing and soothing away all the pain in life holding you down. And that, from a lyric like no ship out on the water will pay the rent, and then you get something a lot more like, what am I trying to say, like esoteric, I guess, like a lot more just a spiritual instead of like kind of a physical metaphor type of thing. His ability to switch between those things, and like there's a lot of artists that could write a verse like that and it would just sound cheesy. Like, can you imagine like Shawn Mendes singing that? It would just sound like schlock, right? It's just the way he can deliver this stuff, and the really distinct voice that he has too. It's like, Sturgill when you hear him sing. It just, the way he can do that really honky tonk, really edgy country kind of stuff, and then do these really beautiful ballads. I think that's what really shows you how good of an artist he is. And, we found out in subsequent albums, but it's like, this was the album, I think, where people got their eyes open to what he was capable of.
I think especially exactly right, because he was showing off so many of the tricks in his bag, because you had the strength of the music, the strength of the lyrics, the strength of the voice, the strength of the concept, all these things coming together at once, because they all are so strong on their own. And then when put together, this is, in our quest to define what is a perfect album, this to me is a perfect album. Even the one thing where I'm like, I might have like a tiny quibble with it, doesn't make it not perfect. I think the concept of the sailor, and especially having been in the Navy,
Mm-hmm.
he's coming at it from this perspective of like, you're young, you're in the Navy, some crazy shit is going to happen to you. You don't know what to expect. You kind of wish you had someone tell you what was coming, but you kind of experienced all of this, going all around Asia in the Navy and washing out and becoming addicted to drugs. Like, not foreseeing what this path is going to be, but garnering a lot of wisdom from that and being able to impart these lessons to his son and to the listener under the guise of the sailor, like a sailor's guide to Earth. There are times where you know that the title is kind of tossed off, or you can tell when someone thinks something sounds cool.
Mhm.
Like what's the Greta Van Fleet one? It sounds like Piper at the Gates of Dawn. What is it?
They probably did say Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
Well, Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
Ready?
Piper at the Gates of Dawn is Pink Floyd.
Let's
But
see. I'll look up the Greta Van Fleet. I'll tell you in a second.
yeah, it's like Darkness for the Army at the River, or something like that. It's something so unbelievably tossed off and like AI generated Led Zeppelin album.
The Battle at Garden's Gate is one of them, and then
The Battle of Garden's Gate.
Anthem of the Peaceful Army is another.
Okay. See, I kind of mashed them up and shitted in them, and I think that's how they come up with their titles. We can talk about the rise and fall of Greta Van Fleet sometime, but you can tell that these are like arbitrary titles that they think sound cool, and it's soulless. But a sailor's guide to Earth is the concept. I have lived this life. I'm going to set it to song. I'm going to speak about it very honestly, and I'm going to deliver it up with this metaphor of the ocean, but also this, like, he doesn't get too mysterious and unknowable and metaphorical in the things that he's singing about. Like, specifically when you look at the cover of In Bloom, like Nirvana lyrics are always kind of like mysterious and inscrutable.
Mhm.
And there are different people say different things, like, well, this is clearly about his friend, and like, well, In Bloom is about, all the people that claim to be grunge fans and claim to think they know Nirvana, but really they were just kind of like, jocks that were fans of Nirvana. There can be like different interpretations, and some of the lyrics you don't get a lot of like definition from them.
Mhm.
Geese is a band that's doing that today, where the lyrics are kind of, you have to work a little harder for them. So for Sturgill to include something like that on this album, in contrast to all this other like very unmistakable, where he's trying to tell you what he means. He's not trying to like hide it behind, irony and imagery and stuff like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just not how he rolls. So for him to cover a song that does that shows off his chops at transforming the ingredients. It could have been a train wreck in lesser hands. It would have either been Sturgill tries to do grunge, which could fall flat on its fucking face, or it could be you countryfied In Bloom to the point where you basically did to it from a country lens what it claims to be about grunge fans doing from the grunge lens. It could have been a dead spot. Like, why that song? Why on this album? Because it's important for him to share the shit he was into at 13 years old. That was the music that moved him. And sharing a piece of it with his son in his own way, sharing it with the listener in his own way, giving us this very complete journey. And it took me a minute too to be like, there's not a ton of linearity to it, because at first, with the way that the album ends with Call to Arms, I'm like, it's weird to end on like a staunchly like political rager when so much of this has been about life lessons. Like, wouldn't you put that somewhere maybe towards like the middle of the end of the album and end on some other kind of rocker that ties up the theme? And I don't necessarily think he had to do that. That was me thinking about it in like a very, very linear fashion. Life doesn't have order like that. Life doesn't make sense like that. And quite frankly, it's one of the most important things he talks about on this is be true to yourself, no blind loyalty to anything, underscoring that in this last song, which is so goddamn funky and complex. And I really want to get into that and get into a couple of these other cuts.
Yes. So
Do you have a favorite off of this album?
So either Call to Arms, because just the line that, and meanwhile I'm wearing my can't pay my fucking bills hat, like just the way he hits that line, it might be my favorite Sturgill moment like ever, other than the whole Dude and Juanita album. I feel like I don't hear people talk about that album enough. It's just so fantastic. We could do another. I think we've done the episode on that one actually.
On Dude and Juanita?
Yeah. Did we not do that? Yeah, I was going to say, I think we did. I love Sea Stories, and I love Keep It Between the Lines. Like, Keep It Between the Lines is between that and Call to Arms. Those two are my favorites on it for sure.
I think Call to Arms musically is probably my favorite.
'Cause it
Um,
goes. It
it
goes
goes.
so hard. Yeah.
It's got that Talking Heads kind of like aggressive groove to it.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. Howling vocals, steel guitar, and electric guitar. I don't want to miss these guys. I gotta call them out. What are their names? The guitar players. Well, one of them's Lord Jomets, who's one of the Dark
Yeah.
Clouds. Who's our guy on the Steely? Oh, Dan Dugmore. These guys are putting in work on the
Mhm.
guitar on this song. Um, there's just like so much chaos and like a giant explosive horn section
And
and
it's
the
the same
piano and the
drummer.
Wurlitzer.
Same drummer as the Johnny Blue Skies drummer right now. Seb
Oh,
Hi-
perfect. Another one of the Dark Clouds. Great.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is kind of the thesis that's going to spur on the musical direction he's going to take. Like you have digressions with like Sound and Fury, which is an album we're definitely going to cover, and like Dude
Mhm.
and Juanita. The Cutting Grass series really is just like bluegrass reimaginings of existing songs. But this is kind of when you see the seeds for the rock era that he's currently in as Johnny Blue Skies started here. You
Oh yeah.
draw a straight line to that. And what Johnny Blue Skies and the Dark Clouds is becoming is very, very interesting. He's a very generous musician working
Mhm.
with some really talented people. And the project itself is fleshing itself out iteration to iteration to iteration with each of these albums. And it's pretty fascinating.
It's awesome to be on the journey, and I'm glad you brought up that you kind of hear what we were gonna. I mean, this was when did this album come out? 2016. So like 10 years later, basically, this album, like 10 years later, this album is still just as important to me as it was the day I first listened to it. And then, I had no idea at this point listening to this album that we were ever going to get Sound and Fury, and we were ever going to get either of the Johnny Blue Skies album, and certainly not Mutiny After Midnight, which we also did a video on. Folks, if you haven't watched that, go back and watch it. But the song Brace for Impact, in parentheses, Live a Little, that if you listen to that, that's like you hear Sound and Fury in there, you hear Mutiny After Midnight, and in that guitar tone that Lord Jomets does on that lead tone, you hear that all over the place on Sound and Fury. So what, knowing what we know now from this album and what he's done since, is there's always a seed that he plants. Now there's a lot of people that are trying to treat Sturgill songs and Johnny Blue Sky songs like it's like Taylor Swift fans finding like little Easter eggs and stuff like that. I don't think he's really like thinking that far ahead of it. I think maybe in any given moment he's, he'll throw some hints around and stuff like that, like the way he did the release for Mutiny After Midnight. He's very cheeky bastard for doing all that. But it's, I think what they do and what he allows the band to do is he knows that he's strong in country music. He knows he could have just made 8 versions of High Top Mountain, probably had himself a very successful career. But that's not the thing he's chasing. What he's chasing is like musical fulfillment. What he's chasing is like, I don't know if he's like, oh, I got to write the perfect song, or like that's a goal of his. I think he's just like, I'm on this road and I want to see where this thing goes. And he's not trying to look that far ahead. So you hear moments in Brace for Impact and certainly in Call to Arms. You're going to hear those same kind of things in Sound and Fury, in Johnny Blue Skies, and you even hear on like Scooter Blues, like there's some of that kind of thing on Sailor's Guide to Earth. There's a lot of times where, and again, I don't know if he's thinking of it this way, but it's like he plants a little seed back there and then he lets that plant grow and harvest it later. I don't know that if that's ever his goal. I think in the moment he's just trying to find like, where is the right place to be with this song? Like where am I going to find the option to like kind of open this thing up and really make it something more than I thought it was at the beginning. And you have some, there's a couple ballads on this album, All Around You and Oh Sarah, that, All Around You is really, I think, because he did that at the Grammys, right? Was that when he did? Yeah. So he did that at the Grammys that year. And I think that's where the national audience, where the question of like, who the fuck is Sturgill Simpson? Because what a performance that was. Can you imagine being those people and going back and hearing that song and then there's like two other songs on this album, maybe one on Meta Modern Sounds that sound like it. Otherwise, you're listening to, they call me King Turd up here on Shit Mountain. If you want it, you can have the crown. Like, imagine that being the first song you hear of his after you saw that All Around You performance.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that contributes to this concept of the mainstream outsider, because you can see, late night television talk show musical performance, you can see awards show performance and say, wow, this guy's like very good, this is very striking, and like you said, track him down, hear this other stuff and go, oh, this isn't like the thing I like, I'm checked out. You could be like a real country purist and either not know this is going on because you're very in your lane, you're chronically in your lane, or you hear it and you reject it outright. That's not country. You give into the gatekeeper bullshit. For everyone that's left, there is this like rabid slice that like people won't look at you like I truly wonder. Most times I mention King Giz to keep that comparison going. You mention King Giz to people and they're like, oh, okay. You have fun with your little lizard wizard band. That sounds really cute and cool, dude. Have fun. Sturgill Simpson, it's sometimes you talk about him to someone, no fucking clue what you're saying. Sometimes you bring up Sturgill Simpson and that other person lights up. It's like the Henry Cavill on the talk show talking about Warhammer realizes the other guy is super into Warhammer and they just psychically make plans with each other. They're like, oh yeah, should we? Yeah, okay. It's that kind of thing when you meet another Sturge. Like meeting another deadhead in the wild is not like a new thing. It's a generic Pokemon that you're likely to catch anywhere you go.
Yeah.
Sturgill's a 50-50 rare bird. And I think it's like you said, where he's like chasing down a musical thought. I don't think any of this is in the pursuit of like perfection or the perfect statement or a definitive statement. I think he just continues to practice his craft. He skipped right over his Grateful Dead era, jumped right over it, and went into like the disco funk era of Johnny Blue Skies and the Dark Clouds. And I love it. It's just, he'll always be able to return to the type of thing he's capable of on Sailor's Guide to Earth, which really was like the seeds of Passage du Désert. More than anything, seeds for JBS were planted here. Mm-hmm. Every trick in the bag that he has, he shows off on this album. It really is like the perfect, if you can get someone to listen to this, it's the Rosetta Stone to any other thing he does.
And I think that is absolutely the case. I don't know. Honestly, I don't think there's a better album to truly, because it's like, so you think about Mutiny After Midnight and how incredible that album is. You think about that, but is that a better entry point to Sturgill than Sailor's Guide to Earth? I think there's a fair argument that Sailor's Guide to Earth is the best entry point. Like if you get into Sailor's Guide to Earth, you're probably going to love everything else he's done.
Exactly. It's the nexus, because the country comes out, like it's start in the center, straight line out to what he does with country, straight line out to what he does with psychedelia, straight line out to what he does with funk, straight line out to what he does with rock. It's all there. This is the one, if someone will sit through this, they'll know what to expect through literally everything else he's ever done. You start somebody on Mutiny After Midnight, you start somebody on Metamodern, when they encounter the rest of the shit, they're not going to know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So this really is like the album that like decodes Sturgill Simpson.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that I found it, like, because there was a chance you never find it. There's always a chance with these bands, that you miss that day. Like we didn't go to the record store that day, so I never got that album. So it's like you think about all these things that had to happen, and then you think about his penchants for very cosmic kind of lyrics, and his the idea that I'm not going to proclaim he's a religious man or anything, but he certainly seems very spiritual and kind of how he writes his lyrics. And certainly I think has an understanding like I do that, I may not be sure of what's out there, but I can guess I don't know everything about what's out there. And I think the journey to discovery is what he's on. He's not on the journey for the answer. He's on the journey for discovery. And whatever answers he finds along the way, he'll just come up with some new questions. He's like, okay, we figured that out. Let's go this direction instead. And I think the idea of Johnny Blue Skies is providing cover for himself versus like the Sturgill Simpson name, where it's like all of this is on me. But we just listed some of the band members. It's like a lot of the current band is in there. That's why you hear so much of it in there. You hear those drums. Like Miles is such a huge part of the sound. Shout out Tanner. Drummers don't get enough credit. And you hear about Laura Gomet. How do you say that guy's name?
I don't know if I'm doing Joe Metz. Like I don't know if that's
Laura Gometz.
correct.
Yeah, close enough. They're gonna know who we're talking about. It's you hear about all these progressions he makes, but it's not as if he's like trying to be in a different era. It's just what he's feeling right now. Like think about the difference in sound of this versus Dude and Juanita versus Cutting Grass versus Sound and Fury. It's like you hear all of those things in there. Maybe there's less bluegrass in here than anything else, but I don't know that Cutting Grass is really part of the canon, I suppose, of Sturgill albums. It's just kind of like a side piece. Yeah.
It should be, because it's the bluegrass era.
It's the bluegrass era, and also he just got together like one of the greatest bluegrass bands ever assembled to do those albums too. So it's like there's so many things that he does, and if he's going to do it, he goes whole hog, baby. Like imagine like being a rising country star and really like had a lane that he could carve out for himself, similar to the lane that like Charlie Crockett's kind of got now. Like Tyler Childers has kind of got for himself now, but he's kind of gone off the rails too and doing some other stuff that he likes to do. I think, Sturgill could have just done High Top Mountain and Meta Modern Sounds of Country Music all the way through and done a Cutting Grass album or something and been an extremely successful country musician. Been somebody that, people that don't like the bro country, you could have carried that torch of outlaw country for Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson and all those guys. But he chose to carry the torch of Sturgill Simpson, and then eventually to carry the torch of Johnny Blue Skies with a bunch of other dudes that are just as talented as he is. Maybe not songwriting, but certainly like the way that it seems like he's got a vision and they nail it. Or maybe he just is like, my vision is whatever you guys are going to do, whatever it is. Like the lack of ego it takes for somebody as talented as him to let other people sit in the front seat with him. That's the thing I think overall, other than the songwriting, other than the musical talent, I think the respect for the people around him, for the art that he's making, I think that's what I respect about Sturgill the most.
I think he's got a great knack for picking his collaborators, people who, if they don't speak the same language, can learn it. Somebody that can teach him something new. I think you can tell again from the progression of these albums that he is growing as a musician. He very well could have. Your mileage may vary with, bro country, tan lines and tailgates, certainly. When do you get into yucking somebody's yum? But Sturgill Simpson could have made the grade and had a very, very fine career as an Eric Church type. You know what I mean? Unique voice. It just careful, Icarus.
Careful.
But you know what I mean? Like he could have had a very mainstream career if that was what was important to him. It's like the Frank Zappa could have been a pop star argument, but something else was more meaningful. Doing it your own way, doing it authentically. A lot of your life spent lost and in many ways like living a lie and a lot of suffering. So you're not going to like brook with somebody's rules if they're going to compromise your vision and compromise what's near and dear to your heart, what you want to do. Shouldn't it be fun? Again, it's not about the pursuit of the multi-platinum career, and it's not about the perfect album to leave when you die. It's just consistent expression. And now my interests have changed. And now I want to do this. And now I want to be this. And you can't tell me no, because I'm going to do it all myself. And I'm going to make an album like this. Like we haven't even gotten into the fact that this is a live album. That this was recorded primarily in the Butcher Shop, RIP. But this was like primarily recorded live in the Butcher Shop. We haven't even talked about the fact that members of the fucking DAC Kings are on this. We haven't talked about the fact that Sturge plays Moog synthesizer, or Moog, I guess it's supposed to be, and arranged and did the horn arrangements on these songs. There's a lot going on in terms of working artists who get a thrill out of doing this for a living. It's not about fame, fortune, prestige, awards, recognition. It's about having an audience and subjecting them to whatever hoves through your skull at that moment in time. I think it's why this album has a lot of re-listenability. It will never have an outdated sound because it is so lived in and it feels so spontaneous owing to that live element. You listen to this and the energy, you cannot fake that when you track things. The energy is there, and it's a time capsule, and it's lightning in a bottle, and it never gets old. It is always, always, always a pleasure to revisit this album.
Yeah, and I enjoyed I think I listened to it like 5 times through when we decided we were going to do this one this week. I was like, okay, good excuse. Let me just rip this baby. And certainly did, like, back and forth to work, doing yard work on the speakers in the house. Like, there's just, when I wasn't listening to Mutiny After Midnight, because I finally got that on vinyl, I was listening to this album. So it's been a very Sturgill heavy week for your boy, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
There are worse ways to spend one's time.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Well, did you have any other thoughts on A Sailor's Guide to Earth, Alex?
No, it's a 10.
Yeah, absolute 10. 10, 10, 10. This was my introduction to one of my favorite artists of all time, and it will always be very special to me. So, folks, make sure you tell us down in the comments what you thought about this album. Was this the one that got you into Sturgill just like us? Did you get in there earlier? Did you get in there later? Either way, we're glad you're here. Alex, where can they find some other Sturgill content here?
Well, you all may already be here at youtube.com/C/out on that line. Or perhaps you're joining us from Spotify, where we can now be found with video episodes of the podcast. Full disclosure, the last like 3 or 4 weeks, I totally forgot. So I'm going to be uploading a backlog, a treasure trove for you people. So if you're here as of the Wuthering Heights Charlie XCX album, stick around. We'll be providing more. But in the meantime, you jump on over to the YouTube, you subscribe, you turn on notifications by clicking the bell, you give the thumbs up so that you like the video, and you leave a comment. We are genuinely interested in hearing what you guys have to say. On our Mutiny After Midnight episode, people weighing in the comments, telling us what Sturgill Simpson means to them, the experiences they've had, the interpretations of the music. We love that stuff. There's a lot for us to dig into. You hit us with a lot of lore and a lot of different nuggets. We grow as people. We grow as podcasters. We grow as Sturgill fans. Do we have a fandom name like Swifties? What are we, Sturgies? Turtles? What do we call ourselves? Do we have to change it now that it's JBS?
Simps.
Simps?
We're
Simps,
Sturgill
baby.
Simps.
Sturgill Simps. Oh, Jeff. That is very good, Jeff. That is very good. That is very good. We are Sturgill Simps. We are Sturgill Simps. And we're all going to congregate here together under this fucking excellent new banner. Good Paul. We'll all congregate here under that banner at youtube.com/C/out on that line. We are also on Spotify. So don't be afraid to join us. Simps Army today.
Yeah, this was a very fun one to talk about. Thank you, folks, for joining us. If you haven't listened to that Mutiny After Midnight episode, please go do so. Tell us what you think in the comments. Tell us what else you want to hear in the comments. I think we're going to do more Sturgill videos because we love him so goddamn much, and we have such a good time talking about him because there's always plenty to talk about. Folks, till next time.